Those that've noped the fuck out of a relationship. What was your they are probably crazy red flag moment? She pulled out a knife and started running in circles around the house with it. I was on a bus back home the next day. Edit. I guess I should provide a little context. The short version. Right before that, she was mad about something her cousin had done, so she came in to complain to me about it. I was busy reading Harry Potter and not listening to what she was saying, so she hauled off and punched me in the balls. She immediately had my attention. I jumped up, or what the fuck? And she started to try to punch me. I grabbed her by her tiny wrists and stopped her. She settled down a little and I let her go. Then she went and grabbed a knife and started circling the house. In the end she said she wanted to cut herself and not me, but I wasn't cool with any of that. The long version involved her dad wrapping her mother in prison, she lived with her grandma, she got pregnant, her grandma died of cancer, she lived with a teacher, the teacher kicked her out because we made the sexy times, she lived with my grandma, she lost the baby, we graduated, we got on a bus and moved across the country to live with her aunt, and then the short version. I've got a recent one. We'd only been talking for a few days, so at this point there is no commitment or anything really beyond a confirmed mutual interest. Immediately I noticed she was getting a bit clingy in that she wanted to talk on the phone several times a day. So I'm already in establishing boundaries mode right off the bat. Anyway, I was walking home from the store, it had just started raining, and my phone battery was almost dead. I had just enough charge left to listen to an audiobook, but not enough for a phone call. This is when she calls me. I begin to explain that I'm walking in the rain and my battery's dead, and that I'll call her when I get home. I didn't get to finish the sentence because she starts in with, "Look, if you don't want to talk to me, just say it and quit wasting my time." Oh, no, you faking. Didn't just lay a guilt trip on me for being soaking wet and miserable on the side of the road with a dead battery. I shot back with, "Don't you even start that shit with me, or I'll never speak to your ass again." She hung up. That sealed the deal. My battery did in fact die on the way home. I log into Facebook, and there's already 3 messages from her. The first one is angry, the next one is apologetic, and the third one is promising never to start drama again. I just blocked her. I check the phone, and there's a bunch of similar texts. She kept texting for a few days after that and eventually gave up. I didn't read any of them. Word to the wise, if there are 2 ways to interpret your motives, and someone always chooses the interpretation that leads to drama, get the fuck away. There was no winning in that situation, and that's how it always goes with people like that. If you're the trusting sort like me, the tendency is to take their complaints at face value and try to make things better the next time. It will never happen. I've wasted a lot of time on people like that, and I was pretty proud of myself for finally recognizing those head games on site and putting a stop to it immediately. Technically we weren't in a relationship, we were supposed to be working together on a creative project. He just liked to pretend we were to complete strangers, and I didn't realize he was doing that until I finally got him out of my life. There were many red flags, but I was a very sheltered and naive girl, so most of them were shrugged off. Looking back now I shudder. So aside from the whole pretending I was his girlfriend thing, there was also the long distance relationship he had with a 17-year-old who looked about 13, Indonesian girl that was clearly exploitative. He was nearly 30. She was terrified of him because he talked all the time about sexual violence or both. All of the books, comics, and films he liked had huge amounts of violence towards women. He worshipped Frank Miller. His own stories were nothing but dead women and the breasts of dead women. When I scrambled to fix artwork that he had screwed up before a deadline, he left me stranded in a city I had never been to before after midnight during an active bomb threat. He was supposed to pick me up, but instead the police did because everyone in the city had gone indoors. Engineered many situations for us to share a bed. Was visibly annoyed when I found somewhere else to sleep. Talked a lot about my body to random people, including potential customers. Bragged that I was using low-cut tops to bring in sales. I wasn't. I was practically Amish in how I dressed at the time. Had a massive hate boner for his best friend's wife, who was always lovely to me. Talked about their sex life in excruciating detail. All relationships he had, while I knew him, were with vulnerable women way out of his league. They tended to break up with him after beating me, because I showed actual interest in their lives, and he got very grabby with them in front of me. I cock blocked him hard without realizing it. Introduced me to his best friend, a 50-year-old pothead with a Doctor Who obsession who treated him with open contempt, and propositioned me twice. We spent days in his house, where he smoked hash non-stop. I must have been coming home stinking of the stuff. I don't know how, or why my parents didn't pick up on it. Walked in on me changing, so many times I lost count. Accidentally left porn in the DVD player and let it play for quite some time, before switching it off. Was probably wolf otherkin. Obsessed with being the lone wolf and the big bad wolf. Confessed his feelings to a mutual friend the day after she turned 18. Left incest porn lying around. Hated every aspect of Asian culture except for its submissive women. Bragged about punching a guard dog. Reacted to me cutting him out of my life by leaving the country. Has not been back since, as far as I know. That's what I can remember off the top of my head. There's probably more. Had a brief thing with this girl, who was in high school, when I was in 8th grade. Found out shortly after she had a boyfriend of 3 years. I told her we couldn't continue, but if there was an issue with her boyfriend, when it was dealt with I would be open to dating her. Well, she never broke up with him, and instead actively stalked me. She knew where I would skate at the time and she would hide in the woods and text me saying she'd like, so you can't meet up with me, but you can skate with your friends at. I blocked her on social media and ignored her calls and texts, and she continued to do so daily for about 3 months. Dodged a bullet slightly different, but this other girl I dated off and on for a year. This girl completely faked me up. She talked me into a suicide attempt because she was sick of hearing me complain. Keep in mind I was in a really tough spot with my depression too. I was always cautious when I would date her again, but every time it was the same damn trap I fell for. The moment I would show I was interested in her, she would break up with me. The final straw was when she did that for probably the 6th time, and I knew I would fall for it again, so instead of trying to talk about feeling, I told her to fuck off and punched her wall. Was it immature? Absolutely, but it got the job done. It ended it entirely, and she never wanted to get back together. Unfortunately for me, she started a rumor that I was the emotionally and physically abusive one, and that I had raped her. I lost most of my friends and I went from a popular guy to someone who is still to this day avoided like the plague. Even the friends I still have don't believe me entirely. They don't think she tried to talk me into suicide, but they believe I'm not a rapist/abuser. Reason why I'm sharing this second story is for anyone out there who spots a red flag. Don't faking ignore it. He had kinda been a jerk the whole relationship. Couldn't take the blame for anything. Tried convincing me that my parents didn't love me. Told me who I couldn't hang out with. Told what I could and couldn't wear, and I would only go to his house because he felt discriminated against in my house due to the fact my parents hated him. In retrospect, for very good reason. Then, on our 7-month anniversary, he proposed to me in his dirty car in a mall parking lot on the bad side of town. My reaction was kind of like my life flashing before my eyes before death, except it was my future. I saw snippets of a shitty, sad, abusive future with him. So I flat out said no, took the ring from his hands, shoved it in his center console, and told him to take me home. He was livid. That's when shit got scary and fast. Instead of driving me back home, he drove to the neighborhood nearest mine and started driving through the cul-de-sacs at 45 miles per hour, punching his steering wheel and spewing obscenities at me. I told him over and over again, take me home, damn it. But he wouldn't. It was mortifying. Finally, after an hour of sheer terror, he parked at the empty lot at the end of my street and asked me what was going to happen. For the last time, I told him he was going to take me the fuck home. So he roared up my street crying and yelling, and as soon as I bust his car door open, he tried to pull me back in. He was much larger and stronger than itty bitty me, and he was using all his strength to force me back inside, and I was using all of mine to get away. I knew that if I got back inside that car, I would never get back out alive. All the way to my garage he was following me, crying, forcing his arms around me to pull me back into his car. I don't know how, but by the grace of higher powers, I was able to pry away from him, open my garage, and close it with him on the other side, punching the door as it went down. A month later I noped the fact to the other side of the country. I blocked him and his shitty family on every social media site, and blocked their numbers too. He had told me he would kill me if I ever tried to leave him, and that night easily could have been it. My boyfriend and I talked early on about seeing other people while being together. I'm pretty monogamous, so I was very against that. It was strange to me as well, since I hadn't been saying no to him when he wanted to have sex. It was like he just wanted to have sex with whoever and still have the romantic side with me. I don't think there's anything wrong with someone for wanting it, but I told him it made me feel really uncomfortable. He said okay, we reached an agreement. Fast forward a few months later, and he brings it up again, as if we never spoke about it before. He had downloaded an app, and was apparently already looking on the side. I was upset, and that's when I realized that neither of us were really wrong in our feelings. We just wanted different things. I know I could probably have been more open-minded, but I also don't believe polyamorous relationships work, unless both people go in knowing that that is what they want. But also what hurt me is he was just going ahead with it, regardless of my feelings. He just decided it wouldn't hurt my feelings, and looked to score. I asked for a break, and we were going to wait a week and just not see each other, and live our lives as single, and see how it went. Almost out of spite I downloaded the same app, and there he was, looking right away. I ended it officially not long after. The worst part? I was blind to how single-minded he was about sex. There were red flags that I pushed aside because I wanted it to work. He had accepted money for sex before. That was a big one. A mutual friend of ours told me he had some mean nicknames for me behind my back. I felt like I was just a toy for him to get off on occasionally. It's also shaped how I date now. I don't trust people who immediately get sexual. Like it's literally a deal breaker for me if someone makes sexual innuendos or comments before a first date or a long time speaking. If it's long distance, I will not have sex on the first date. It's made me feel like a caricature of a 1950s man. I feel like I have to settle down with someone and get the white picket fence life, because what I really want is stability. I'm not out of my 20s, and I feel like I'm so different to all the people who want to have casual sex, because I'm put off by it so badly. Like all decent people, when faced with signs of difficulty going in, I told myself I could handle it, support her through it, give her the security she needed to improve, and the time and patience she wouldn't get from most people. So although I raised an eyebrow at how she seemed to believe anything at all anyone told her, like how I've never seen a vagina, can I look inside yours? Whilst doing the typical gap year student traveling and letting a stranger finger her, and how she said she had suddenly turned on someone she was itching with, and got out of the car in the middle of the Australian outback without knowing where she was, or even carrying any water. I didn't worry too much about that. And to be honest, I was blinded by my own desire. She looked like the young Zooey Deschanel, but with Selma Hayek's body, and she was intelligent, with a sensitive moral character. I really wanted to be with her. And she was intense. She shared every thought, texted me 100 times a day, broke my headboard whilst riding on top. It was easy to think she felt the same way too. For a while. So I still wanted to be with her despite telling me that she was ashamed of me. We had a large age difference, and that I could never meet her friends or family. I still wanted to return when she asked me to walk around parked cars after a night with her, so her, or male, flatmates wouldn't see me. I still wanted her, even though she asked for a 3/some with my closest friend, and then changed her mind, and told me she didn't want it now, but when my friend asked about it, told him it was still on. And when, to try and impress him, she started putting me down whilst I was sat next to him. She's just a bit insecure. We can work through this. I still wanted her when in the middle of making love, she said to me, you know, it's going to kill you when I dump you. I need to find you someone else. I still wanted her to come back when she suddenly flipped in the middle of making love and screamed about touching her underwear and ran out the room with them. When we came to leave, I spent an hour and a half with her trying to find them, as she was now paranoid someone else would find them. 2 months later it turned out she'd hidden them, and my own, in the boot of the car and instantly forgotten she'd done it. I still wanted her when she would get manically depressed, and her male colleagues took advantage and told her to dump me and be with them. When she was good, she was incredible, and I really wanted to believe. I still sort of wanted her when we'd booked a short holiday after minor surgery I had scheduled, and she dumped me again a few days before the hospital appointment, asked we still go as friends, but not change the single bed booking. And she started drifting around the road whilst driving, and said to me, "Isn't it amazing when you start to see the lights on the road dancing around?" And then got furious with me when I demanded she pull over and take a rest because I was genuinely scared we were going to crash. I still angrily faked her and softened and foolishly forgave her despite a following row over wanting to sit on the bed for a moment and rest because the stitching in me was hurting, and the movies I brought with me that she'd said she wanted to watch before we left, she now said she didn't and had always hated them. And then started hitting me as hard as she could with pillows, claiming she used to fight like this with her sister, whilst I refused to raise a hand to her. I finally started to stop ignoring red flags when on Christmas holiday, she flirted badly with my brother and completely ignored me sitting next to her. The nope, I'm the fuck out now moment came when she texted me to say an old university friend had written telling her she was his dream girl and would she be his sexual slave. And she wanted to know if she could do it. I said no, he's asking you to be exclusively his, don't you care what you're doing to me? And she said, well, can you outcompete him? Tell me what I would do for you as your slave that would turn me on more. So I threw some ideas out that we'd often talked about and suddenly ghosted for a day or so. When she got back in touch, she said she told him no, but I told her it was over. Except even nearly a year and a half later, it's not. She contacted my friends. She called my family. I told her to leave me alone. She wasn't respecting my needs. 6 months later she sends a text hinting that her life isn't going well and she finally appreciates me. Thinking she was in trouble, I stupidly picked up her next call. She proceeds to tell me all about her new boyfriend she made maybe a month after we stopped talking, but I wish he was more like you. He doesn't do any of the great things you do. I ended up in tears. I text her the next day and ask if she understands what I said. She says I need to focus entirely on him. I block her number. My line then gets tested numerous times by a withheld number. She continues to call my friend she asked for a 3/some with. He doesn't have the courage to tell her it's not fair because, well, she's amazingly charming when she's new to you. On my birthday she calls again. Eventually I work out she's using her mother's business lines to get around call blocking. I tell her I don't even want to talk. She still keeps calling people who know me. Recently I discovered she'd moved city into another flat full of men she's sleeping with, but that she's also switched jobs. She's working in care just like I do to try and understand me better. I wonder if she'll understand what it's like to work 12 to 14-hour shifts with the dying and then come out of work to a text that asks her to outcompete other women or she'll likely be dumped again. Probably not. She's not evil, but I never worked out what exact personality disorder she clearly has. But it wasn't one that responded to dedicated love and devotion, so for my own mental health's sake, she's permanently red flag. I miss her still of course, at least the things she told me, because she wanted to please me. But I have no idea which of them were ever really true. My feelings were. But still. Red flag, red flag. We had only gone out 1 or 2 times. He'd been very complimentary, shared some very personal details of his childhood, and was a nice, hard-working guy. A few things jumped out at me. Thank you PTSD from emotional abuse. He said he was in tech, and then only after a conversation I tried having about it revealed he worked retail. We got too drunk and too high when we hung out, and he knew I didn't like to drink/smoke a lot. He laughed when I'd get scared because he'd drive and brake too fast, and he was putting me on a pedestal when I kept making it clear I wasn't a fan of that. And then came this. You know how I can tell you like me? Your pupils dilate when you look at me. It means you're aroused. The reason I recoiled so hard I almost wound up on the ceiling was that my abusive ex said exactly the same thing, but about my flushed cheeks. and our relationship had started with the behavior this guy was demonstrating. Perks of hypervigilance: it's basically a spidey sense for abuse, and I realized he was getting me comfortable by putting me on a pedestal, making himself seem vulnerable, and then going in on deducing my feelings by measuring my biological reaction. And I've been through enough. Let's just give him a chance to know that it isn't a coincidence, it's a pattern of behavior. I'm proud of myself for telling him how that made me feel uncomfortable, and how maybe he should talk to a professional, especially about some of the personal things he shared with me. Suddenly never heard from him again after that. Oh well. I was dating this guy for a short while over the Christmas period a couple years back. While I was at home with my family, he bought me Left 4 Dead on Steam and would insist we play it every day. When I started to say I can't, I really need to spend time with my family, he got all weird and pissed off with me. Following on from that, he brought his GameCube back from his parents after Christmas, but the TV in his house was a new model that didn't have the right port to plug it in. He phoned me up one night and asked me to bring my TV to his house. Bear in mind I was living in London, didn't drive, and had to get 2 buses to get to his place. I said, why don't you bring the GameCube to mine, it's smaller and easier to carry, and he freaked out. He started shouting down the phone at me, I would do this for you. I'll prove it. I'm going to bring my TV to your house. I won't stay though, I'll just show it to you then leave. His TV was a pretty large flat screen as well. He continued, can you hear me? I'm unplugging my TV. Look at your texts, I've just sent you a picture of me holding the TV about to walk out the door. I checked, and he had indeed unplugged his TV and photographed himself in the mirror holding it. I sat there listening to him ranting. Finally I said, I don't want to see you this weekend anymore. I need some space for a while. Then he started panicking. When will I see you though? Tomorrow? Next week? I hung up and sat with my flatmates trying to understand why this guy had lost his shit over such a tiny thing. Then he proceeded to call me every 10 minutes for the next 2 hours. I ignored him, but finally, to get him to leave me alone, answered and basically had to calm him down, saying I would see him on Monday. Needless to say, the next time I saw him I ended it, and his response? Yeah, you need to do some growing up, tbh, you're quite immature. All these little things started adding up and making me think his actions had manipulative intentions as opposed to sincere ones. He kinda had to talk me into dating him. I was at a really low point in my life, and he was very aware of it. So I told him I wasn't in a place to date anyone. But then it was, give me just one date, just a chance. I know how to make your life better and take care of you. I beat depression, so if there's anyone who can help you, it's me. I can introduce you to the most loving people and friends. You don't realize it, but your friends now are terrible. I'll show you what it's like to have real friends. He begged me to stay the night after our first date, not for sex, but because he genuinely just wanted to have me next to him. Then it was the next night, and the next night. The first night I just wanted to go home, giant crying freak outfit. It's the honeymoon phase, you're supposed to never want to leave my side. I stayed to appease the crying, always talked about how well liked he was in his friend group, how his friends are real good people unlike my trash friends. Basically said he was the king of the best, nicest, coolest people, and that I'd fit right in and finally be surrounded by people who really love me. But they were all kinda jerks, and they didn't like him as much as he said they did, so I ended up very isolated. It was always just the two of us. Said he loved me after 2 weeks, and when I said I was uncomfortable with that because it was too early, he promised to stop saying it. But then couldn't help it because his love was too strong and he was going to keep those feelings inside. I kinda felt browbeaten into saying it back, buying me really nice, expensive things without me asking, and continuing to do it even after I expressed that it made me really uncomfortable. I don't come from a well-off family, and he really does, so he was buying me things I never even touched in my lifetime. I hated it, and I tried expressing this, but he had this whole speech about how, if anyone deserved nice things, it was me, but it actually made me feel like I was indebted to him. Honestly, it wasn't even his faking money he was spending, it was his dad's. Convinced me I had shitty parents/sister too, to the point where I actually stopped talking to my family, and recall, he convinced me my friends sucked too. He always said it was like us v. the world. that the two of us were just so much smarter, nicer, better than everyone else. So we have to be picky about who we spend time with. He was always mad about how I was too nice and accepting just wanting to be friend with any old person who was nice. He always said nice wasn't enough and I need to stop basing my interactions off who was nice because nice isn't as valuable as smart, funny, etc. Lost his sheet when I didn't want to do blow one night at this big event he invited me to. I'd even said I was fine doing it the next night, but that I just didn't want to do it 2 nights in a row. Cue freak out, yelling, threatening to send me home, and naming all the other girls he cold taken instead who would actually be fun. Ugh. I just let myself be manipulated so easily. It sucks to look back on, but I like to think I'm more aware of the signs now. Dated a girl, we'll call her Amber, I'm a guy, for about a month when one weekend night we decided to get pretty hammered watching movies. We did the deed and laid down to fall asleep when the next thing I knew, she was on top of me, beating the shit out of me. I had fallen asleep for about an hour or two, and during that time she got up to get some food. My roommate, female, we'll call her Rhonda, got home from her night job and they started chatting over a couple more drinks. Now, there were a few red flags before this. I'd almost ended it a few times due to some terrible racist or homophobic vibes I was picking up from her. Back to that night, I was awoken by a flurry of close-fisted hits to the face from a girl my same height, 6 feet 1 inch, and 15 pounds heavier than I. I'm 155. During the chat with Rhonda, they both had a few more drinks and apparently started making out. Rhonda slowed things down with the self-hating secretly be Amber, and they went back to chatting. Rhonda told Amber about how I was legitimately heartbroken while I was going through a divorce 4 years prior. Amber knew I was divorced, but I hadn't gotten to the point of really opening my feelings up to her. This sent her over the edge. Drunk, still horny, cork blocked from her first lesbian experience, then learning that I was in love with my spouse while I was married to her. Definitely not anymore. She went into rage mode. After getting her off me, I was trying to calm her TF down. At this point she can hardly stand upright and is screaming about how we were finished. I knew we were definitely done, but I didn't want her leaving my house because she also never had a second thought about driving drunk. I loved myself in a room and kept saying through the door that she needs to go to bed, not drive, and sleep it off. I texted Rhonda to sneak out and steal her keys so Amber couldn't drive home. After hearing a few screams about not finding her keys, the door opens, her car starts, and she pulls away. Apparently she loses her keys so frequently, when she's drunk she has a few hidden keys on her car, so she can still drive drunk. We were definitely done on every account. The next day was all voicemails from her begging forgiveness and dumping all the truth bombs she'd been hiding for the past month in attempts to get me to feel sorry for her. She was a pharmacist, clean-cut medical professional, admitting she's been addicted to opioids for 5 years. Her family in Nulla are all certified Klan folks, so she can't help being racist. Her brother in our city was the leader of a local racist branch. She's secretly bi, but she's also helped beating a gay guy back in her hometown, putting him into a coma for a month. Her other local brother is a drug dealer pulling in $1 million drug sales per year in Vegas, and is a pimp, possibly sex trafficker, and the list goes on. TLDR, trust your gut when red flags pop up. They could turn out to be way worse than expected. When I was younger I was loosely involved with a girl from work. We met up a few times for drinks and sex, to put it bluntly. One Friday night I turned down a request from her to come out. I was really tired and wanted to chill with my new Smallville box set. The next day I received a flood of texts from her saying she was attacked, as she went out on the Friday anyway. She told me she was raped by a friend of her ex. 3 days of constant support to her. I get her to agree to go to the police and make a complaint. We ended up being interviewed separately after we explained the initial complaint. I was a wreck. I was in mad tears of my own during the interview because I felt responsible. She had gone out on her own. That if I had agreed to go out too, none of this would have happened. After about 2 weeks the police decided there was no action to be taken, that there was no case to answer, that there were way too many holes and inconsistencies in her account. I was devastated and angry on her behalf. My boss was also my friend. He had heard about the attack. After coming back into work, after meeting with the police, I was in a bad mood, and he spent time with me talking about it. At the end he said this: "Do you think the police are really lying to not investigate this, especially with all the shit they have had in regards to rap support recently? Or do you think she has done this for your attention? You were casual. It looks to me like she wanted more, and you did not. Since this attack you have been with her 24/7, and she seems remarkably okay, don't you think? Hell, even if I and the police are wrong, do you want to be involved with a girl anyway that will go out with another guy because you said no to one date just to try and make you jealous?" None of this I had considered before. I noped the hell out of there pretty quickly and cut contact. The girl was fine. Only 2 messages afterwards 6 months apart. Message 1. "Hey, my sister is coming to visit from 30 country. Can you pick us up from the airport?" I was like, what the fuck, who does that to someone that you have not spoken with for 6 months? Message 2. "After a year, I have sent you a gift to say sorry for everything I did and that things did not work out. Gift was a new mobile phone, top range at the time. No return address. I called her to try and get her address for her new place to return it. She wouldn't provide it and said, sell it. If you do not want it, I would understand, but this is my apology and I'm not taking it back. Use the phone for the next 2 years. Good phone. Hope wherever she is now, that she is in good shape and got her mind and life sorted out." I was pretty deep into things with one girlfriend, and I had actually known she was mentally ill to start with, self-harmed, bulimic, PTSD, but about 1.5 years into the relationship I found out she had faking it. She had multiple personalities. Now, previously I had even said to others, and maybe even her, that I could handle a lot of issues, but not multiples. Being with someone, in any type of relationship with them really, who has this is the biggest mindfuck you can imagine. She had her host or normal personality, or 3-year-old child, disturbing as fact to see or so be like a preschooler, and bizarrely another one who was in control, and was almost exactly like her host personality. The only differences was that one didn't have bulimia, was much less inhibited, smiled more, and had a bizarre obsession with ocelots/a tiger fetish. And once the last one had started to come out around me, she also liked me and wanted to be out more. After a few months of this, and feeling like I was dating 2 people at once, and missing one, while the other was out, and also being a caretaker, I couldn't take it anymore. I loved her, and truth be told, she was a perfect match for me, but she was just too mentally ill for us to function together. I've not spoken to her in years, and I hope she got the help she needed. I spent all day doing some badass zombie SFX on him and my housemates before a Halloween party with kit I bought myself. He was sober, so drove the 4 of us to a party in town in my car. At the door I found out I'd left my purse at home because I was rushing my own MacUp and they wanted to leave. No one would pay the friggin' £10 for me to get in, and he was nowhere to be seen. Walked home on my own, in the dark, in the rain, crying. Not long after I got back home my housemates come running, "Insane, your car's fine, it'll be fixed, don't panic." So I was like, what the hell happened to my car? Turns out he had tried to chat up a girl he used to crush on as soon as we got there and been rejected, drunk himself stupid, somehow convinced 7 other people to cram themselves into my Renault Clio, tried to drift it round a corner, and ran my car into my landlord's wall. No one was hurt, but the funny side of it is that the landlord freaked out when he saw what looked like a macabre clown car show going on when 8 seemingly mortally wounded people drunkenly clambered out of a tiny wrecked Clio one by one covered in fake blood and zombie makeup. After he gave my keys back I locked him out of my room. He punched a hole in the wall next to my door, which my landlord was also pissed about. Noped out after that. Threw a fit early in on the relationship because I wouldn't give her a key to my apartment. Like, I'm talking just a couple months in of knowing each other. Calls me up at work and asks if she can have my key. My apartment has a public laundry room rather than Hue cups in my unit. Her apartment is the same situation. But my apartment not only charged about 50 cents less to run both the washers and then the dryers, but the machines were actually a bit bigger, so you could get in bigger loads. So, understandable that she's rather come over to my place and do some laundry. Problem is, that laundry room requires a key to get in, and that key is in my apartment because it's just the one key, and there's both me and my roommate living here. So she wants my apartment key to get inside and get the laundry room key. I tell her no, but I'm literally off work in like an hour, so let's just hold off and she can meet me at home. Nope, we show up at my job and make a faking scene in front of my co-workers and everyone. I tell her we are done because I don't appreciate her showing up and jeopardizing my job with a big episode like this over such a stupid thing that could have waited just 1 hour. I have a 2016 Mustang GT that I love to death, and she knows this. On this day I drove my old Beta-03 Explorer. The Mustang is at home parked in my covered spot. So she tears us out of the parking lot in her vehicle and damn near hits some car on the street as she cuts them off. Then slams on her brakes and the poor son of a bitch she nearly hit comes close to rear-ending her. Why? Because she needed to turn back around and haul back into the parking lot at work to tell me that my Mustang is so faked right now. Then she tears us back out of the parking lot. She made it to my apartment complex in time to find a cop car staked out in front of my car because I don't play those stupid games. I told her I was calling them before she tore us out of there again, and she even had the level of maturity to call me up and say she made it to my car and no cops were there lol. Meanwhile everyone at work was cool about it thankfully and was all Jesus Christ dude, you need to go home and make sure this bitch doesn't fuck with your car. So I had left shortly behind her. Got home, spoke with the cop for a bit, and thanked him for his time dealing with some dumbass drama. He said he didn't see her, but did see a vehicle that matched the description of hers cruise through without stopping anywhere. Even he parted ways with the final thought of you obviously made a good call not giving this dumb chick the keys to your apartment. Lol. A sign that should have made me a bit suspicious was when she was talking about living together and getting engaged after 1 month of relationship and barely 2 or 3 months of knowing each other. Also when she told me that she was talking with her friends who were back home. She was Chinese, told her how good I was to her, and they told her to never let me go and chase me if I wanted to get away. Actual red flag was when she threw an absolute tantrum at me because I didn't want to let her inspect my wallet in public transportation in a big city on a Saturday night around 10/11 p.m. I was afraid that someone would just grab it and run. We were next to a door, and I also didn't want anyone rummaging through my wallet, especially since we hadn't been together for that long. She gave it back to me and stopped talking for the whole ride. I just got out and went back home. She then started losing her shit and messaged me insult after insult. She told me go ahead, swear at me, we fight and we'll be done, but I refused to say anything. Next day, she messages me, you still coming over to help me with homework, right? I knew I didn't want to be with a girl who was 5 years older than me, but still throwing a fit at me over something so childish, so I told her we were done. But she wouldn't have it. She begged me to come and see her so we could talk. She said it would be better. She wouldn't act like that anymore yada yada. Then she asked me for my address. She didn't have it. I wouldn't give it to her. So she found my flatmate on Facebook, who she had never talked to, and explained the situation and asked for my address. He didn't give it and blocked her. She kept messaging me that she knew my neighborhood. She came over and looked for my place for hours in the cold, telling me she was starving and freezing, but that was her punishment, and she accepted it. Then followed weeks of constant harassing and messages, physically blocking me in hallways to force talk to me, until I had to push her out of the way several times. Then a 2.000 words email 3 months after, and another one 6 months after, asking me to get back with her, and how she had changed, and some serious FB stalking more than a year after. TLDR. Psycho Chinese girlfriend threw a tantrum at me over a wallet and asked my flatmate for my address the next day when I told her I wanted to break up. She spent hours walking in the neighborhood to find where I lived before giving up. Still sent me messages months after to convince me to get back together and heavily stalked me. Went on a date with a girl that was a few years older than me. The first date we met at a restaurant. The next one I picked her up. She wanted to go to the casino. It became very clear she had a gambling addiction. I didn't play. I just watched her lose $500 despite anything I said. She insisted her machine was hot. It was not. It never even got lukewarm. She lost all her casino comp, $200, and cash, $500. 40-minute car ride home she casually tells me she doesn't have her license. News to me, but she insists she told me. Nope. She starts to break down about all the money she just lost. I told her she probably shouldn't go to the casino if it makes her that upset. It's at this point she tells me it's the only thing she ever does. She has no friends. She doesn't have any hobbies. She tells me she has to go because she owes her bank and everyone she knows money. She tells me she lives at her parents and they wanna kick her out because she owes them so much. I drop her off and lie saying it will be okay. She asks if I'd like to go out again sometime. I say sure, but I'm thinking hell no. I figure if it's not the casino it might be good for her to do something else. The next day she calls me crying. She missed the bus to the casino and needed a ride. I told her no, but we could do dinner because I'm retarded. I pick her up and she says that she will tell the police I rapped her if I don't take her to the casino. I told her lying wasn't moral and it wasn't nice because I was just trying to be nice and take her to dinner. I was paying, she had no money. She wouldn't drop it, so I brought her home. She was on the phone with the police already. I waited for them to show up because I was innocent. They put me in the back of a squad car and start asking me questions. Her parents come out and escalate things. It looks grim, but I explain my case. They don't really buy it, as her parents are also saying I was an abusive boyfriend. Nice to meet them for the first time, I guess. I ask if I can grab my dashcam and show them my dashcam. Yes, that Beach Records audio. She broke before I even got a chance to show them the video. Still showed them the bit where I explain lying isn't right and her saying she didn't care. She goes off how I'm the worst boyfriend because I won't take her to the casino. Talking to an officer and I give him the cliff notes of our relationship and I was just trying to help her out. He told me to run and asked if I wanted to press charges. I said nope, she has enough problems. Till girl addicted to gambling threatens false rap charges if I don't bring her to the casino. She didn't know I had a dashcam recording everything. So I was dating this guy that always seemed 100% out of my league. He was 10/10ths gorgeous, had dated these leggy model types, and was insanely charismatic. I was generally pretty insecure and couldn't believe how much he loved and doted on me. We were dating for about 5 months when a mutual friend told me that he was still in contact with exes and was pretty flirtatious with them and other random girls. This hurt because he never mentioned that he still spoke to his exes. I brought it up and said that, while I respect that he's entitled to be friends with whomever he pleases, that I just wasn't in a place emotionally to be in a relationship with someone who was super close with their exes, and that we should probably go our separate ways. He was desperate to stay with me though, and he offered me all of his social media passwords to make a point that I could look up all his private messages so that he knew I know he wasn't doing anything to betray my trust. So I stayed. After all, if he was hiding something, he wouldn't just give me all of his passwords, right? He told me that he should have cut ties with those exes years ago and that he loved me and would do anything to show me he was serious about us. Turns out, this was the worst thing that he could have done. He made me feel so insecure and like I'd never be loved again if I didn't have him, that I became obsessed with checking in on his social media. Until one day, after about a year, I inevitably saw him invite an old classmate of his over for casual sex through his FB PMs. No, I don't know why he would have done this through FB if he knew I had his password. Probably didn't realize I was on my break at work, so who knows how many times this happened, and I just didn't see it. Called him and told him it was over right then and there. Desperate to win me back, he gave me 3 of his guitars and multiple other valuable items as collateral. Told me that if he broke my heart again, I could sell them off. He then got a therapist that specialized in such addiction. The therapist cost more than he made, so then he started draining his mother's bank account just to pay him. His mom was happy to oblige too, because apparently she knew about his problems and was desperate for him to get better too. I still feel really bad for her. He insisted that I come to a therapy session, and stupidly, I obliged. His therapist then told me that he didn't even exhibit the signs of such addiction. That basically, he was just a huge narcissist and had to have attention on him at all times. In more therapist words, of course. Even though I had broken up with him, the constant need to check up on him was driving me crazy still. The day after that one therapy session, I looked up his email drafts and saw him in the process of messaging a hooker he found on Craigslist. I sold all his collateral the next day. I had been trying to get out of the relationship for months, but he kept reeling me in with new promises to do better. Noped out officially on the day I saw the hooker email. I feel stupid for staying so long, but it just made no sense to me that someone who would spend thousands on a therapist and give me all their passwords would continue to just do crazy bullshit. He made me feel like I was the one going crazy though. All the checking up on him I had to do just to feel like I wouldn't have rug pulled out from underneath me. It's been 2 years since I last saw his face. For the 3 months after, he would call me every day, always leaving a drunken/sobbing voicemail. I would always ignore them. After the phone calls stopped, every 4 to 6 months, I would find a note from him on my car or under my doormat. He lives an hour away, and the last one I got was 2 months ago. He still sends me flowers on my birthday 2 years in a row now. Shudders. I'm just happy to be out and happy to be free of the habitual checkups that cause me so much stress. There had been problems for a while really. He'd shown signs of jealousy and little white lies about small things over time. But then a bigger thing happened. Some backstory. I'd had a blog running at some point while we'd been together, at Blogspot as it used to be known, and which I'd never told him about. It was just a separate thing that I did sometimes. Anywho, at one point, some random person calling themselves James responded to one of my posts. While chatting to me about the post topic, James also dropped in flirts and suggestions about meeting up. I brushed them aside and dropped the conversation. I thought nothing of it other than to think a random person found a young woman's blog and decided to try flirting. Whatever. I quickly forgot all about it. So, a year or 2 after that, my boyfriend and I were arguing because I'd brought up that I didn't think we were working as a couple and that I had doubts about wanting to stay. After flipping his shit a bit, saying I was ruining his life, etc., I agreed to take some quiet days before we came back to discuss our relationship together. On that day, he seemed to see that I clearly still want to go. I was frustrated that he seemed to not understand my points or just dismissed them, only to insist that it's important we stay together for reasons. Then out of nowhere, during a silence, he looked at me and said, "You know, I met a guy named James at a party the other night." It seemed a complete non sequitur until he added, "He told me he knows you from online, that you flirted together." Once I realized who the hell James was, the entire universe shifted into focus. The layers upon layers of lies involved. The sheer chain of stupid lies in this one statement. I could barely believe my faking ears. I remember looking at him and actually saying, "Oh, you stupid lying sheet. You might really have convinced me to stay until that. Now I know for sure I have to be as far from you as possible." Never looked back. TLDR edit, ex-boyfriend invented an entire person in a long con to paint me in a bad light. Not as bad as much of the crazy here, but here it is. Just note, this happened in the days before cell phones were smaller than a car battery, so everyone had landlines. My first girlfriend in high school. I would call her before I went to bed every night for the inevitable sugary high school blah blah conversation. After a few weeks I started getting a lot of hang up calls. 1 to 2 a night, soon it was 5 to 6. I didn't think anything of it. It was annoying, but my sister's best friend had a psycho mother. I assumed it the mom calling, a long story, and hanging up when she heard my voice. I had said some very unpleasant things to her in past 2 AM phone calls. After a while, girlfriend started calling me, getting angry because I hadn't called her that night. She'd often yell, "Why haven't you called me? I knew you were home." I'd always answered something like I always call before I go to bed. I was going to call in like 20 minutes. I didn't, and probably wouldn't have put it all together, except she had a cordless phone. For the young UNs who are confused by this, cordless phones used to make very specific fingerprint-like sounds when they hung up. If you spoke to someone with a cordless phone regularly, like every day, you got to recognize the sound their phone made when they hung up. Well, you can see where this is going. Finally, after a lot of hang-ups one night she called and said, "Why haven't you called? I know you were home." I answered, How do you know I was home?" "I just do. You have a cordless phone. I recognize the sound it makes when it hangs up." Long pause. Relationship didn't last much longer. Not exactly when I decided to end things, but this definitely reinforced the decision. I had recently gotten out of a LTR and was casually dating a few different girls. I was completely upfront about the fact that I was just having a good time and was not exclusive. One girl, Kim, lived about an hour away, and due to conflicting work schedules we rarely saw each other, but she would be in my area occasionally and we'd go out. At one point, I hadn't seen Kim for nearly a month and had started getting serious with Lisa. Things were really going well, and I'd decided that I wanted to be monogamous with Lisa. Kim was going to be in town one day, so I decided I'd break things off. I prefer to do these things in person when I saw her. Well, Lisa spent the night before, and we were taking a shower that morning when I heard my dog barking at the door. He barks a lot, so I didn't think anything of it until he suddenly stopped. I got out of the shower, walked around to the front door to find Kim standing in my kitchen petting my dog. I was a little freaked out, told Kim she couldn't just come into my home. I lived in a controlled access apartment and didn't always lock my door. Kim knew that the back door to the building sometimes didn't close all the way, and that's how she got in. So, it wasn't a huge deal, but Lisa was in the shower, and I told Kim she had to leave. She wasn't happy but eventually left. I went back and told Lisa what had happened, and she was none too happy about it. She got dressed and left, and I called Kim and told her I'd meet her at a coffee shop down the street. This is where it gets weird. At the coffee shop, I told Kim that I wasn't alone in the shower and that it really bothered me that she'd just let herself into my home. Now, the only family I have in town is my sister, and we are close. We spend a lot of time together, and I talk about her a lot. What really freaked me out was that Kim said, out loud, in the coffee shop, "I knew you weren't alone in the shower." I couldn't figure out why you were so freaked out. I assumed it must have been your sister in there. If I was dumbfounded at the words themselves, I was floored at how nonchalantly she said it. I tried to assure her that that wasn't the case, but she couldn't fathom that I could have been upset for any other reason. She told me more than once that if I had someone else in the shower with me, she'd love to join us. She kept pushing the sister thing, and I kept denying it, thinking I must have sounded guilty. After a bit of this, she said, in a conversational tone that I'm sure others could hear, "Malleable, I don't care if you're sleeping with your sister." I didn't think before I reacted, so I'm sure the other patrons got an earful. My immediately response was, "Well, you should." Anyway, that's the short version of the story. 8 years later, Lisa and I are happily married, and I still have a movie that Kim left at my place. Edit. TLDR, casually dating a girl who let herself into my apartment while I was in the shower with someone else. She assumed I was upset not because she'd come over and let herself in, but because the person in the shower must have been my sister, and was totally fine with that idea. I dated a woman with a kid for approximately a year and a half. Whilst dating, I worked for a grocery chain called Stater Brothers in the application process for a local police department. For those who don't realize, the application process is long and grueling and could take up to a year. Well, she was all supportive of me wanting to go into law enforcement until the day I had my interview with the chief. She then declared that it's a shitty profession, I'd become an asshole, I'd probably cheat on her, become abusive and drunk, and that she hates cops. Mind you, this was a complete 180 from her apparent attitude. Well, I wasn't going to have any of that. Moving from a job I despised making only $10.80 to a career I've always wanted to do earning $42.45. I left. Fast forward to the academy 7 months later, I see a Facebook post, through a mutual friend, that she and her boyfriend were celebrating their 1 year. Fast forward another 6 months and apparently her phone was stolen, and she reported it to the local PD with explicit instructions on how she didn't want me to respond. She was told the department can't guarantee. The officer who helped her is a close friend of mine. He remained professional and calm until she started talking shit about me and veered off topic about her phone, and she was recorded. It was beautiful. Needless to say, she complained and her complaint was shot down. As of now, I'm happily married to the woman of my dreams, have a 3-month-old son, moved apartment to better my career and actually work with my brother-in-law, who's also an officer in my department. Life is happy. First date seemed pretty normal, coffee, talking about movies, music, books and such, so we agreed to go out for dinner/movie a few days later. I picked her up at her place, and while waiting for her to finish getting ready noticed she had an Elvis shrine in one corner of her living room. I'm standing there looking at the velvet Elvis painting, mugs, photo of her at Graceland etc. point, when she comes in, and asks me if I like Elvis. Apparently my reply along the lines of I enjoy some of his music. Not a lie, I do like some of his stuff. Wasn't enthusiastic enough as she went straight into a screaming tirade about the king, and how she had loved his music all her life, how important it was to her, and how anyone she would be with had to have the same passion about it. She went out of the room to get her purse or something, and I took the opportunity to leg it out the door, got into my car and away. Not once during the first date did she mention Elvis, so this all came out of nowhere. Turned my phone off and went to a movie at a different cinema. Had a few missed calls when I turned my phone back on, but no messages or anything. 3 AM I start getting text messages from her about how I had gotten under her skin and she wanted to see me again. I had gone from bemused at the situation to pissed at being woken up, messaged her telling not to contact me again in any way, and signed off with "Fuck Elvis, I'm glad he's dead." Then blocked her number. Nowhere near as bad as other posts, but need to get this off my chest. Had a guy that I met through some mutual friends we had, and I was good mates with his little brother. We didn't get too far in the relationship, went on a few dates, and spent a lot of time together. I stupidly jumped headfirst, because he seemed like the perfect man. He was sweet and romantic, and anytime I needed him he was there. So after a couple of weeks hanging out, his housemates go out of town for the weekend, so he asks for me to come and spend the weekend. I agree, thinking it'll be a good getaway. Now the weekend itself was okay, it was the aftermath that was not. He began telling all of our mutual friends that we were dating. He told me he was in love with me and wanted to get married and have a family with me. After I turned him down and told him we need to take a step back and slow down, he tried guilting me into staying. He began telling me that I was a stupid hoe, calling me names, tell me how stupid I am, and then in the next breath he'd be apologizing and crying telling me I'm the best thing that ever happened to him and he needed me in his life. He began threatening to kill himself if I left him, keeping in mind that we hadn't even discussed what the hell our relationship was. So I spoke with his brother, told the brother what was going on, and then I noped out of there. About 1 week after I cut off all communication with him, I found a blog that he had been writing, and it was all about me. Made up stories about how I abused him. Apparently I tried to poison his food, how I would scream obscenities at him when he did something wrong, call him names. He was saying all of this, but still saying he was so in love with me, and that he would do anything in this world to be with me. Sorry for the length, and if there are any mistakes, first time posting. Unfortunately, I saw the red flags, but didn't know about. We were both in high school, and whenever I hang out at her house, I had to be out by about 1900 on school nights. Her parents' rules. My parents didn't need me home until 2000 on school nights, so it's always go hang with my best friend, who lived 2 doors down from her, and watch Jeopardy before going home. About a month or two in, she said it doesn't make her feel special when I go hang out with my friends. After hanging out with her, shoulder note then. So I stopped going to my buddy's house on the weekdays. From there everything kind of snowballed for the next couple years. Skipped out on my best friend's high school graduation party. Skipped out on half of my own graduation party. I actually tried to break up with her numerous times, but it always ends with us back together. She would cry and throw a fit, or she'd come over to my house and refuse to leave, even after I found out she'd cheated on me. Eventually, I joined the army and put some distance between us and successfully removed myself from the relationship. I was going to join anyway. TLDR, I let her isolate me from friends and family and regret devoting years of my youth trying to please someone who was impossible to please. Started dating a guy I met on a pretty upmarket dating site. It was the first guy I dated after getting out of a long-term relationship with a sociopath. The guy seemed to totally have it together, was starting to take steps to do a doctorate, was very proud of his education, and he had a really decent job in a university. Apparently he hadn't had much relationship experience because he put so much into his education. Fair enough. He seemed the perfect gent. First signs of red flags were in the bedroom. He often couldn't perform. I put it down to nerves and tried to be reassuring. One time he actually did after some foreplay but stopped mid-thrust. Asked me if it was okay to stop. Can't refuse that. And then with no explanation, lay on the bed and tried to play I Spy. He had clearly expressed an interest in being a dom, and a few times we tried bondage, but it soon became apparent he just wanted to hurt me. The real biggie after that was the drinking and small admissions that came with it. Bottle of wine, nice meal, another bottle of wine, and oh by the way I'm diagnosed schizophrenic. Date night, some JD, some more JD, and oh by the way I was abused as a boy by another boy and his mum, and I kinda enjoyed it. More wine, and oh by the way my abuse gave me a warped idea of healthy sexual relationships, so I need to feel like I'm abusing to get off. By this point I was creating distance. I went on holiday to Vegas, and while I was there he messaged my friend to ask if she would join us in bed. Decided not to contact him again on my return, which was the best idea. I got back in the AM after an 11-hour flight, hadn't seen my kids in a week, but that wasn't a good enough reason to not make to effort to get a babysitter and spend the night with him apparently. I faked off right out of there. After that he carried on texting me saying he felt like an unlovable monster. He was obviously drunk and admitted to me that he had tried to kill himself in the past because in his words my abuse gave me a preference, apparently that preference was young girls. That explained his desire to abuse me, but then being unable to perform. I was too old for him at 28. He admitted he had looked at pictures online of young girls then tried to kill himself for it, then went to the police, admitted it all, got sectioned, had all his electronics taken and checked by forensics. Apparently after admitting to the police what he had downloaded they weren't interested, and he honestly couldn't understand why I wanted nothing to do with him. The situation still haunts me now a year on, and I've never been able to tell a soul that last lot. He always made sure to tell me that he was giving me information that could destroy his career and life. I was about a year out of a divorce. My ex-wife and I had been married for 2 years before splitting, and before that, we'd dated and lived together for about 5 years. It had been almost a decade since I'd been in the dating world, and truth be told, I didn't even know how to date anymore, let alone how much dating had changed since the last time I had done it. Before, you went out, had fun with your friends, and met new people, and if something clicked with someone, you explored that opportunity. But now it's much different. Beside the point though. Suffice to say I had resorted to online dating. Not cheating on online dating. Met my current wife online. But met this chick online. I'm from a small, rural, predominantly white southern town, so dating this girl would be the first time I'd ever dated outside my own race. She was a really pretty and sweet mixed girl. Black father, white mother. We went out a few times, and things were going really well. I'd made it a habit at this time that since my divorce was so fresh and all this was so new and I had so many things to sort through personally that I was really just looking for someone to have fun with. And that didn't mean sex. I mean, I wasn't taking it off the table, but that wasn't my intent. I was new in this city and I literally knew no one. The closest person I knew was halfway across the country. So, really what I wanted/needed was a friend first, and then if things grew from there, I wouldn't fight it. So, like I said, things were going really well. She was a lot of fun to be around, and I really enjoyed hanging out with her. Then her dad died. I felt really bad for her, and she took it pretty hard. They were really close, so I tried my best to be there for her. She asked me if I would go to the funeral with her, and even though this was still a relatively new friendship/relationship/whatever, I agreed to go. Met her whole family. Things continued to go okay for a couple weeks, but then she flipped a switch on me. I was working the late shift at my job at the time and got off work around 9 p.m, which was great. I missed traffic both ways to work and could hit the gym after work and have the place basically to myself. So, Monday Friday from 9 p.m. till about 11:30 or so, I was at the gym. One night, on my way there, she called and just wanted to talk, and, short version, the conversation shifted to her wanting to do something with me the next day, Saturday. I explained that I'd made plans previously with some of my work friends and would be busy, but would be free Sunday. She flipped her shit at me and started screaming and crying and calling me names, saying stuff like you came to my dad's funeral and all this craziness. So, I just hung up and went to work out, left my phone in the car. I came out 2 hours later to find 30 missed calls/voicemails and about 150 text messages with mixed messages. Like some she'd be mad and screaming if voicemail, or all caps if text, and others she'd be begging me to call her, saying she was sorry and that she loved me, and all this. We had only known each other a few months at this time, which was way too damn fast for all that for me. So, I just turned my phone off and went home and went to bed. Only turned it on the next day to coordinate with my friends, and then it went right back off. Didn't talk to her again until Monday, when I finally let her talk to me again, after making her promise to talk to me like a person. Then she was very apologetic. But, at that point, I was done, and she asked if I would still come to her birthday party, and I said no. This will get lost, but here it goes. One of the staff where I work gave the system my contact information out of the blue, and I get a FB message from this stranger saying as much, and that we should date. I'm bemused. I love it when women approach me, so I start chatting with her. We do not live in the same town, but it isn't far to where she is, so we start discussing me coming over and meeting her. At this point, the deep questions begin. Do you drink? How much do you drink? Do you get drunk? Do you black out? Do you smoke weed? Do you who women? Are you a whoer of women? Spelling error hers, and totally confusing at the time. How many women have you faked? Did you fuck someone when you were out of town last time? Do you have tattoos? At the tattoo question, I stopped playfully answering or diverting out of awkwardness, and went full nonsense. I told her I had several tattoos, all religious faith-based stuff. She asks about piercings, same thing. I have many, all under my clothes, because I'm a lawyer, but important to my faith. She finally asks what faith I am, and I, expecting her to call me on this nonsense and laugh, say Scientologist. She takes a while in responding, and then asks, is Scientology and Christianity are compatible? I tell her, only if she accepts Lord Zeno into her heart and converts. She says this is a deal breaker, and, being drunk and exasperated, I tell her I was just having a laugh. She's asking if our religions are long-term compatible, so I'm messing around. No tattoos, piercings, not a faking Scientologist. She then starts giving me shit for being drunk on a Thursday night, since she had to work 2 jobs, and resented my income and freedom, whatever that meant. I didn't even explain that I have more work and debt than I can deal with, because I'm a faking lawyer. And then grills me on what hotel I will stay at when I come over, what kind of room I need to get, and tells me I need to buy specific condoms. This is all after her questioning me on whether I would want to fuck her the first time I met her. It was way too much. I noped. Stayed home and hung out with my brother and sister, and had a great 4th of July. During our first date she constantly got calls from some guy. Apparently she had recently broken up with her gangster boyfriend. As our date went on, the phone calls just got worse, and they argued and cursed loudly with each over the phone. It got to the point that the guy she was talking to made death threats against her. She wouldn't reveal where she was, but he made sure that she knew that he was looking for her. Although I was afraid that someone might show up and try to hurt us throughout our date, we nevertheless hung out the entire evening and spent the night together in a hotel. The following day we parted ways. But not long afterwards, I started to get life-threatening phone calls and text messages from the gangster ex-boyfriend of hers. I do not know exactly what had happened between the two of them after our date, but he had managed to steal her phone and had read every text message on it between me and the girl. That way he found out my name and phone number, and he was furious that I had faked the girl and was looking for me. I never answered any of his calls or text messages, but they contained a lot of threats. However, I got a phone call once from an unknown number and picked up. It was the girl that talked to me, and I asked if she was fine. She said she was, and that nothing too bad had happened to her. She wanted to meet again, but somehow I felt it was a trap. I decided to not play hero and try save the girl. I noped the fuck out, changed the SIM card, stayed away from where I had socialized with the girl, and made sure to not go out alone for a while. Never contacted or heard from the girl again. Lucky that me and the girl did not spend the night at family or friends' place who could have been caught up in the drama. I had been talking/sleeping with this girl for about 10 days or so. She was super attractive, had similar interests, and really just seemed like an awesome girl. Now, one night I had planned to go out with my roommate. Him and I went out to a local bar every Wednesday for their student nights, just as a boys' night kinda thing. This girl I was talking to asked if she could come along with us, and I informed her that unfortunately, I just wanted to go with my buddy as it was kind of our tradition, and he had a girlfriend at the time, and she never came along. She replied with okay, I'll just go with my friends, and see you there. I was a little thrown off, like okay that wasn't the point of me saying no, but whatever. Fast forward to that night, I walk in with buddy and we see his girlfriend's cousin, who is a girl, and her friends, and we just go over to say hi. Immediately after we do that, the girl I'm seeing comes up and says you said I couldn't come with you, but you're here with these hoes, and walked off. That was super shocking, like what? Anyways, night continues, and she comes up to me about 2 hours later, bawling and crying hysterically that I'm all over every girl when in reality, I was not at all. I'd understand if I was, sure that would probably hurt her feelings, even if we had only been talking for just over a week. I'd probably be a little upset too if she was hitting on other guys, it's human nature. However, I was not at all, and was super shocked that she was losing it over something that hadn't really happened. Hell, she could have asked me about it, or expressed her feelings, and we could have had a conversation about it. Anyways, she continues to cry, and then proceeds to start punching me repeatedly in the face, while pushing me against the wall. She stopped after around 10 swings, took a drink out of someone's hand, went to throw it at me, but ended up hitting my buddy and not me, lol. I was so shocked, and could not believe what was actually going on. After that, I did not see her for the rest of the night, and ended up going home shortly after. I wake up to a text from her, saying wanna talk about last night. Nope, I have zero interest in you anymore after that. Nope nope nope. Where do I start? First of all, I was young and dumb, and stayed with this gem for 5 years. In these 5 years I was constantly accused of cheating because of things like he would call while I was at work, and since I was a lifeguard I wouldn't be able to call him back or text him until either my break or the end of my shift. I also constantly had to send him all of my money, and then he would scream at me that I'm cheating on him and spending all my money on someone else when I didn't have anything at the end of the month. If you have ever heard of Destiny's Child Say My Name, it strongly described this relationship. Another time he knew that Miami traffic scared me, and he drove like a maniac, so upon finding out how afraid I was he sped up and started darting through traffic. and slamming on brakes and essentially acting like we were in a Fast and Furious movie, and I started to cry out of fear, to which he laughed at me, then got extremely mad at me for crying like a little bitch, and then kept doing it. He was allowed to have so many female friends because they were all sisters to him, but God forbid I even say hey in passing to an old friend from school. Just so many things were wrong, and it took me way too long to listen to the sirens. 2 years later, and I'm married to my soulmate with our first child on the way. Thank God. Last I heard of old buddy, he was with some chick mooching off her dad's money. I moved to a new town, didn't know anyone, and a friend of mine from elsewhere hooked me up with his female cousin. I'm a male, so she could show me the city and introduce me to some people. Great girl, she was seeing someone, but became a decent friend. So we are out one night in a little group and I see a reasonably attractive girl in the distance, kinda flirting but not really. I didn't know if she was with this guy or not, so I didn't approach. I see her taking a lot of selfies though. A few weeks later, I meet the same girl out with a different group, and she asks how long I have been dating my friend. I explain we have not been dating. She has been nice enough to take me out and show me around. We kinda had a fun night, ended up hooking up at my place. When I left for work the next day, on my car, taped was an envelope. This girl took a selfie where I was behind her and photoshopped it so it looked like we were together and had it all printed out. So she had to have had it printed out in the bar. I have no idea where. She didn't have a purse or anything. Later that day she finds me at work. Finds me. I didn't even tell her where I worked and says, don't we look good together in that picture? I blocked her number. Didn't answer my phone. Explained that we were not dating, and I luckily never had another problem after that crifest. Cross post from this thread. Oh boy, story time. I live in Melbourne with my partner and her other boyfriend. We are polyamorous, but that's not really the focus. I had being the operative here, a long distance relationship with a girl in Sydney that we'll call Jane. At least I thought I had a relationship with her. Anywho, our polycule had organized a trip up to visit her and her other boyfriend who we knew and we thought we were friends with. About 2 weeks away from Halloween weekend, we find out that she and he are aging Trump supporters. We are not. I figured that because we're Australian and can't directly affect anything happening in the USA, everything would be fine. I can only assume that I was very wrong. We fly up, meet her at the airport, then taxi to her place. She seems normal, bubbly, and exactly the person I had been talking to for the past 6 months. We go to bed, and when we wake up in the morning she informs us that she has a shift at work and she'll be back later to take us to a Halloween party. At no point had she told us beforehand that she had work over the course of the weekend that we had been planning for close to 4 months. Us three had flown to an unfamiliar city to spend time with 2 other people, only one of which we had seen so far, and now we were being left to our own devices. Okay, cool, we can deal with that. She comes back from work and is in the foulest mood. Says a handful of words as we make our way to the party, and the moment we arrive she pours a drink and vanishes. No introductions to the host or other guests. As the night wears on, I try to chat with her on several occasions, or at least put myself into a position where I could, and she either completely ignores me or walks away. I'm getting anxious and really confused, and my partner and Metama are super confused too. Someone manages to corner her, and we organize to head back to hers. Uber comes and we all hop in, Jane with her headphones in and music blaring. Super awkward, weird, 40-minute ride home. We go inside, and she pulls out her headphones and says, so what's up? That was a really good party. Why are you all so down? I had a really great time. This leaves us flabbergasted, and when I try to confront her about how no one's really spoken to her over the past 48 hours because she's been absent, she starts gaslighting really hard, trying to convince me that yes, we had spoken, and yes, she had told us that she was going to be working a bit over the weekend. She promptly disappears to go see her boyfriend. We decide that staying with her is a very bad idea and manage to have all our stuff packed and out the door in less than half an hour. Thankfully I had family down the coast, so we jumped on a train and headed down there for the rest of the weekend. Sorry for the wall of text. TLDR, my partner said it best. It was supposed to be a nice hangout with friends. But the friend we were staying with turned into an icy uncommunicative gaslighting bitch who actively avoided us until we grabbed our stuff and bailed while she was at work on the second to last day. Wasn't in a relationship with the guy. Just hung out a few times. He asked me to go on a dinner date with him one night and I figured I'd give him a chance and see if I felt a spark or not, as every time we had hung out previously it was just as friends. Dinner was nice, and as always he was great to chat to, and at the end of dinner he kissed me when he dropped me home. Unfortunately I didn't feel any spark and decided that I would tell him the next day because I didn't want to lead him on. Well, after I showered, when I got home that night I logged into Facebook to discover he had changed his relationship status to in a relationship with me and made a faking novel of a status tagging me saying how magical our date was and that he was positive I was the one and how he couldn't wait to spend eternity with me. I quickly tagged myself and sent him a message telling him at no point of our date did we discuss being official and that I was sorry, but I didn't have feelings for him and I was not his girlfriend, and that the fact he just jumped the gun and declared us a couple was strange to me. He genuinely couldn't understand the issue and kept begging me to stay with him. I just ended up being firm, saying we weren't ever together for me to be leaving you. We had one date and never discussed a relationship. I'm sorry but I'm not interested. Heartbroken status from him 5 minutes later about how all girls ever do is break his heart, etc. Crazy. 4th of July, this girl I was seeing showed up and I didn't invite her inside to take a hit of the joint my sister and I were smoking because her and I were about to go smoke anyway. I made her wait maybe 2 to 3 minutes in her air conditioned car while we finished the J. She was so seething about this that she proclaimed she was going to ruin my 4th of July. So I said relax, let's just go do some fireworks. She storms out the door ahead of me and I closed that sumbitch and locked it. Turned off my phone, cracked open a beer, waited about 20 minutes and then went outside to blow shit up. She was still there. She attacked me with her tiny fists and I held her back and told her to get away, leave, etc. Didn't spill my beer. So she finally relents from hitting me and starts breathing heavy and scanning for things to fuck up. I set up a pipe to shoot bottle rockets out of and go to get some fireworks. So she takes the pipe out of the ground. I go to put it back in the ground and while I'm doing that she pours my beer out. I'm trying to ignore her, but she keeps messing with me like this, just trying to be as obnoxious as possible. Finally I get tired of asking her to stop, so I say, "You're gonna get in your car and leave now, Jess," and I light up a bottle rocket and aim it at her. She says no. Bottle rocket whizzes right past her. No. I light up another one. This one lands at her feet and explodes and her eyes get a bit wider and she goes stop. I say leave and light another one. This one skipped past her and she finally left 3 bottle rockets. I had to shoot 3 at her before she would leave. Batshit insane. Stay off OkCupid. Great stories. Mine is not as eventful, but still has psycho melodrama. This happened back online 2001, when I was 17. Good times lol. My ex and I had been dating on and off for about 2 years. I say on and off, because every once in a while, she would call it quits, which was hard on me, since it was my first serious relationship. Well, one summer she was coming back from an out-of-town church retreat, and thought it'd be a great idea to surprise her, and maybe go out on the town for dinner and a movie. I kept calling her phone. Texting wasn't as big as it is now, and never was able to get a hold of her, so I called her mom, and got her eater info, and met her at her house accordingly. She was not happy to see me, and starting saying she had plans with friends, male, that she met at camp, etc. Decided it was best for us to move on, and broke up with her. Since then we hooked up every once in a while, but was never serious, since I knew how it would be. Fast forward a few months, and starting a new girl, my current wife with whom I have 2 great kids with. Well, my ex caught wind of this, and she'd hit the fan faster than a diarrhea cannon pointed at a wind turbine. As my new girlfriend and I were out cruising to lunch, I got a call from her parents' house. Weird, I thought, as I wasn't aware that my new girlfriend's parents had my cell number. Well, turns out it was my ex calling from their house. She immediately asked where I was and told me to pull over or she was going to start breaking shit. Not wanting to embarrass myself any further, I agreed to meet at S local gas station. When she got there, she pulled in and slammed on the brakes, almost hitting my car, and jumped out yelling, "Are you with her? How dare you? You were just in me 2 weeks ago. I wanted to have your kids." After a few minutes of her chasing around the building, I just threatened to call the cops and said she's crazy. Somehow this diffused the situation and she just agreed to meet later that day. Happy to say I never made it to that meeting, but FWIW, she is now married and lives far away from me now. Thank God. TLDR, crazy ex went to my current girlfriend's parents' house, called me and told me to pull over so she could yell obscenities at me, and then current girlfriend, who is now my wife and mother of my children. I was about to graduate university and she was considerably older, going to college for the first time. She had a 10-year-old who lived with his father full-time and a baby who lived with her, and the father denied it was his. And she was full-time evangelical. I was getting an A in the science class that she was failing, so she invited me back to her place to help her study. Best sex I ever had, before or since. That went on for 6 months, and while that part was great, the neuroses and the jealousy slowly emerged, but I ignored them because 24-year-old guy. After the semester ended, she asked if I would go to a city 500 miles away to meet her parents. Time to meet the parents, sure, I guess. We get there, and while she is evangelical they are not. But guess who gets to sleep in the car and find somewhere else to shower and not be in the same room with her unless her parents are in the room too. By day 3, 2 overpasses in the car, I suggested that maybe she should just take me to the airport. I still remember the two of us standing curbside facing each other in mirror shades, San Diego in June is sunny, and shaking hands. 5 years earlier, different ex, also 10 years older, we spend a summer together, and one morning in her place she starts talking love talk to her pitbull and master, baiting him. Nope, gone that morning. One more, not mine but a buddy who I'd known since first grade. Years later, after we had grown up and both been through our first marriage and divorce, he hooks up with a gorgeous model who can't keep a job as a hairdresser. I'm single and freshly out of an ugly divorce that left me in bad shape. He's huge, 6 feet 7 inches 260, all physique, and great looking, and a man's man. She is tall and 10 heads gorgeous. I walk into a packed club with them, and the crowd just parts as they walk to the bar or the dance floor. It's like I'm Moses parting the Red Sea when I walk behind them, except I'm invisible because all eyes are on them. I danced with her once, and she was fantastic, incredibly sexy, and the dance floor just cleared for us. That does not happen to me. Her 2 kids are full-time with their father. In hindsight, that was a hint. About a year later he calls me with a serious problem. She has been seeing a real young guy on the side. He's a dropout drummer trying to get into a band and living in his bedroom at his parents' house. Both she and the drummer dude are unemployed. She has asked my buddy if she can continue living with him, keep the baby, and have the drummer dude move in with them. My divorce was still fresh and raw, and I told him to call a locksmith to get the locks changed and just throw her stuff out in the yard. It was the wrong thing to say, and I'm sorry I said it. Lost him as a friend. Edit. Added 2 more stories. Sat next to a really cool girl in my college art class. She was really shy too, and even though we also would go to the gym afterwards at the same time, we didn't really talk until late in the semester. Finally she sparks up a conversation in the stretching area with me. We have a great conversation, and she ends it by asking me to lunch. I say yes. First red flag, she immediately responds with yay. Now I can tell my mom that I have friends. She had been in college for a while now. The time for the date comes up, and while I'm studying I ask where she wants to go. At first, I thought she was doing the typical I don't care that you often get, but she ended up genuinely wanting to stay on campus and go the regular old cafeteria. At this point, I'm thinking, maybe this isn't a date, and she just wants to be friends and we'll go to lunch. I was a little disappointed, but was perfectly fine with it. We go to lunch and start a conversation. Second red flag, she talks a lot. I didn't get a word in. If I contributed, she immediately took over. All the rest of the flags, she went through chronologically the 20 plus times that she changed her hair color all the way back to junior year of high school. If I tried to change the subject, she would immediately revert back to the list. She had a tattoo of her dead cat's name on her wrist and told me about her 6 others each with pictures. She admitted she was a Diet Coke addict and that she had a pyramid of empty cans in her dorm room. I asked what her roommate thought of it. Oh, she left. I got the fuck out of there. I had a super jealous girlfriend who, if I was gone somewhere too long, would call every single one of my friends to find out if I was cheating. Broke into my Facebook and email to check my messages all the time. Threatened to kill herself once when I tried to break up with her. She was also a terrible drunk. I spent 4 years trying to convince her that I wasn't cheating on her. Lost a few great friends who happened to be girls because I chose not to talk to them in hopes that it would make her more comfortable. One night, we both went out to a pub with some friends and her dad, and I wanted to go home earlier than her, so I said goodnight and kissed her goodbye. She told me she'd be back later on, and her dad, and I drove home to his house, where we were staying for the night. At about 2 AM, I woke up and realized she wasn't there. Checked my cell phone, but there were no messages, so I went back to sleep, although I was a little worried. Same thing at 4 AM, but now I was really worried. Not that she was cheating, although that went through my mind, because she constantly accused me of it, but that she was hurt somewhere or something. Tried to call her to make sure she was fine, but there was no answer. At 6 AM, the house phone rang. Her dad was asleep, and it was his one day off, so I answered. It was her, clearly really drunk. She told me she stayed at a friend's house and demanded that I come and pick her up. Her friend's house was an hour away, so I told her that she could either wait until a reasonable hour or find her own way home. She started screaming at me, telling me I was a shitty boyfriend and that a good boyfriend would come and get her, so I hung up the phone and tried to go back to sleep. For the next 45 minutes, she called over and over probably about 20 times, getting more and more irate each time. Finally, her dad yelled down the stairs, "Who the hell is it?" I was pretty embarrassed to tell him, "It's your daughter. She wants me to come and get her at XXX house." He laughed. "Now, it's 6:30. Tell her to wait." Finally, though, just to get her to stop calling, I picked her up. She was in the middle of the road when I found her and stumbling around. Breath like an alcoholic dragon. I mac-up smeared everywhere. I had brought her a coffee, even though I was super pissed. She screamed at me the whole way home because I didn't want to pick her up immediately, even hit me a few times. Nothing super hard, but still. If I had done the same thing and stayed out all night without telling where I was, her head would have exploded. Now, I have to deal with her screaming at me and hitting me because I came and picked her up when she was sheet-faced at 7 AM on a Sunday morning. That was the final straw. Broke up with her that afternoon. For me it happened in the middle of a raid in World of Warcraft. For context, I run a guild made up almost entirely of friends from college. We were having troubles in one of the fights due to our best DPS not receiving enough heals from my ex. Then all of a sudden he decides he's going to do the whole dominant hand of God bullshit and starts screaming every insult he could think of at her. Yeah, we were all frustrated at the time, but he went way overboard for an issue that he was a direct cause of. I came to find out later he was trying to impress me with what he viewed of as his amazing leadership skills. Unfortunately I didn't dump his sorry ass that night because I had just chalked it up as a case of overly frustrated raiding and figured it would end at that. It only got worse from there. After that he started getting more and more openly hostile with the guild's second in command, who also happens to be my best friend. I guess he thought I was going to dump him for her, even though she's happily married and I'm straight. On top of that, he started flirting with the guild's other females whenever I was offline, leading to several of them suddenly finding reasons to leave. Outside of the game, he subtly got more dominating with me as well. I went from a strong independent gal to a meek servant of his bullshit. What finally snapped me out of the depressed loop I was trapped in was when he informed me that, since I was still going to get my degree, he had since dropped out. I would be the one to pay off all of our debts. Meanwhile he couldn't hold even a part-time job for more than a few months at a time. The fact that he was making plans for how to use my finances for his own benefit and expected me to just accept that as fact pissed me off and stoked a fire that I didn't even know I still had. I dumped his ass the very next day and completely cut him from my life. No regrets there, and now I'm happily married to the man of my dreams. Also apologies for any errors. I'm on mobile and almost never post more than a short sentence at a time. I broke up with my high school girlfriend twice. The first time it was because I was heading off to college and we just fought too much and it wasn't worth it anymore. The second time it was because I figured out she was crazy. TLDR, ex-girlfriend pretended to be anonymous friends of hers for months and emailed me repeatedly to attack me and goad me into getting back with her. After the first time, she was pretty crazy upset about it, and a week later her best friend told me she dropped out of all her upcoming classes at community college and asked me to talk to her. I didn't want to fuck up her life, so I tried to create an arrangement where I was her friend and life coach or some shit. This lasted for a few months, which were rocky at best. During that time, I started getting pretty hateful and angry emails from some anonymous friends of hers. I tried to ignore them, but I couldn't completely. They continually goaded me to get back with her and tried to make me feel like some giant asshole. Eventually, I don't know if it was pressure from them or feeling bad for her or just being lonely, but I stupidly decided to get back together with her. We tried to make the long distance work, but she was in a weird place and we didn't fight any less than we had before. Plus, every time we fought, the emails would come again. They got nastier and nastier, and eventually I told her about them. She expressed her surprise and couldn't imagine which of her friends would do that. Thing is, neither could I. I was on pretty good terms with her best friend, and as time went by, she alienated herself from each and every single one of her other friends. I gradually became suspicious, and after a while I started to notice that the way the emails wrote and the way my girlfriend texted was remarkably alike. I eventually asked them point blank who they were, and they came up with some story about how they were a childhood friend who I mysteriously had never heard about before. We were together for about 2 years. I challenged them to call me and prove that they were not my girlfriend, and they refused. The next day, I broke up with her and did not look back again. Went to meet the girl at her home to take her on a movie date, our first one as a matter of fact. Her dad greeted me at the door, invited me in. Everything was cool and civil. He asks me to sit down on the couch so he can find out a little more about me, etc. Still pretty standard stuff. He asks what I want to do with my life, where I plan to go to college, all stuff I haven't fully thought out yet. He tells me, son, in our culture, which was Indian, when a boy and a girl get together, we expect that they will be married. I answer, paraphrased as it was a long time ago, and I can't remember exactly. Well, sir, I certainly respect that perspective, but being as I'm only 16 and have not fully had the chance to develop a life plan just yet, I can't guarantee anything along that line, though I'm certainly open to the possibility, assuming that everything works out and everyone is interested in proceeding in that direction. He then called his daughter down and asked what movie we were going to see, which she was too embarrassed to say because it contained the word naked in its title. It was The Naked Gun. We ended up going to the movie and we held hands sweetly, all sweaty palmed and such. She rested her head on my shoulder. I rested my head on her head, crunching up her 80s hair. It was a sweet date. I really liked her, but damn. After I dropped her off at home I went home and noped the fuck out of ever calling her again. 16 is way too young to get engaged, much less on her first date. She ended up getting knocked up a few years later, not underaged, but pretty close to the starting gate, which I found out about through Facebook. Seems to have her sheet together, but holy shit did I feel like I dodged a bullet. The most recent girl I was seeing, I noped out of dating her before we started being official, so we met in a bar and hit it off. Started seeing each other every day or every other day depending on work schedules. Everything was fine. I had a wedding to go to one day and ended up having to postpone meeting up, but I'll let her know in advance. So we arranged to meet later in the day. Call her and we make the new plan and everything's fine. Then she texts me 10 minutes later telling me how, although she's into me, we are not fit for each other, and not to contact her again. Okay, I give her a call to see what was wrong, but she doesn't pick up. Fine, I guess she doesn't want to hang out anymore. The next day I get a text from her asking to come over to my place to hang out. I'm a little confused, but I say okay. She comes over, and we have a talk about what happened, and we talk. She explains her background of having been in an abusive relationship and her trust issues. I say, that's fine, I understand, but for me, I value communication as a method of building trust and I will fight for the relationship if we are both in it. But one mistake isn't enough for me. Call it quits, and maybe we can just start over, take it slow, to build trust. She agrees and we make plans for a few days later. Not 1 hour later, after she gets home, she texts me again and tells me that, since we are starting over and taking it slow, maybe we should cancel our plans. At this point I'm pretty much through with her, and I don't argue with her. I just leave it at okay. The next night she texts me again wanting to see me. I'm already done but relent again. Again she comes over and we talk. She tells me about her previous marriage in more detail, but her details don't line up. Dates and passage of times don't align with previous stories, including how long she was married, how long she lived in places, even including how old she said she was. So I ask her. There were many inconsistencies that I couldn't get my head around, and at that point I straight up told her that I don't see this working out, and I think it would be best if she goes. 3-year relationship. Had gone through her suicidal tendencies, her alcoholism, her anxiety, long distance too. I also have anxiety, but she never made much effort to deal with that, especially near the end. She ended up breaking up with me over Facebook Messenger a week before I left for uni. She insisted she still wanted to be friends, but was rude about my interests. She had never really shown interest in the things I liked, and post breakup told me that I'm glad I don't have to deal with this anymore. And called me sensitive, something I had previously addressed with her as being something that I don't like. She told me, you need to grow a thicker skin. You'll never make it in the art world like this. We are both artists. That was the final straw for me. I told her to contact me if she ever felt like being more mature. She's 2.5 years older than me, and blocked her on Facebook. That relationship really faked me up. I was in it since I was 15, and we broke up when I was 18. I ended up with a lot of issues regarding my own sensitivity, and my current partner, who is a lot more level-headed and patient with me, has had to tell me that my sensitivity isn't a bad thing. He also told me, you could have an anxiety attack every day. I usually have one every few weeks, and I would still want to be with you, and has lived up to that. Edit. TLDR. First partner was emotionally manipulative, ended up breaking up online after 3 years, told her to grow up. I didn't actually date this guy for very long, but my family set me up with this guy, a nice Jewish guy who was a successful lawyer and, supposedly, spoke 3 languages fluently: Chinese, French, and English. I was taking Chinese because I was a giant weeaboo, but I wasn't fluent. I was in my 2nd semester of the course. My biggest problem was handwriting, but I also mangled pronunciation at times. Even so, I could manage to understand most of what was being said in front of me, so long as it was what I had learned. This guy apparently wanted to impress me, so he took me to a really upscale Chinese restaurant in the city and started ordering his food in Chinese. I nearly died of embarrassment. First, most people who work at international restaurants in the US, like Indian or Mexican restaurants, are fluent in English. This is doubly true for waiters, who have to heavily interact with English speakers on a daily basis. Second, someone working in a Chinese restaurant may not necessarily be Chinese, especially if it's a well-liked restaurant with lots of customers, like the one we went to. A family-owned restaurant will have to branch out and hire people who aren't relatives once the business expands, and it's illegal to refuse to hire someone based on their race. Our waitress was a first-generation Chinese immigrant, but I wouldn't have guessed that at all. Third, he did not speak Chinese very well at all. Chinese is a very difficult language. If you stress the wrong syllable or use the wrong tone, you can say something very different from what you were initially trying to say. Most people who take Chinese learn how to say I'm sorry, my English is not very good, before they learn how to say anything else. My date was not one of those people. During the meal, my date told the waitress he wanted to sleep. When she asked him what he wanted to drink, he meant he wanted to drink water. Told the waitress he wanted to eat lucky meat, he meant chicken. At one point I think he asked where he could find some toilet paper. I don't know what he meant to ask, maybe for a napkin. There were other mistakes, all of which a first year Chinese student could and did correct. The end of the night came, and my date started asking the waitress some questions about her personal life. This is of course a rough translation. It was a great deal worse than it's coming off here. In Mangled Chinese. So, do you live with family? Yes, I live with my 2 sisters, X and Y. Is X your Mary G, gibberish, or your G Mary? G Mary means prostitute. The waitress looked incredibly offended, but didn't say anything, because she knew it was probably a grammatical mistake. I slipped her a 50, wrote her an apology letter, and decided that I would never ever go out in public with this douche canoe ever again. When I was younger, I was very trusting and very naive. My parents had sent me and my brother to live with my aunt for a school year. I met this kind girl who was into lots of the same things I was, had the same sense of humor, and was kind enough to help me get used to the new school. And a week after we met, she asked me out. Since I have never had a girlfriend before that, I was excited and said yes. She ended up needing me to buy her lunch just about every day, but supposedly had a fairly large amount of money in her family. She ended up cheating on me and laughing as I told her I wanted nothing to do with her. About a week later one of her friends had told me she was extremely broken-hearted and wanted me back. Naive little me gave her another chance. At this point, many of the students at my school were trying to warn me about her, telling me she's manipulating me and using me. I pushed them all aside as she and her friend from earlier requested. Well, she cheated on me again, and I was completely done with her. After I moved back with my parents, she had continued to text me about missing me, regretting everything, blah blah blah, and tried guilt tripping me in other ways. I blocked her in every way possible, and as far as I know, she's still unhappy with her choices. I do hope she's in a better place, stopped lying, and is a better person, but wouldn't care that much if her boyfriend is cheating on her for the 2nd time in a row. Well, here goes. After reading a vast majority of posts here, I felt compelled to write one of my 2 life-changing red flag relationships. I will disclose the most recent one as that one was more consistently painful. She came to me over Facebook at first. It appeared she was a friend of a friend, and we had never personally met. But, knowing my wild personality growing up, I know damn well I have a streak of funny stories under my belt to never tell to my potential future grandchildren. I figured given the mutual friends we had, she had heard a tale or two and came to me directly. A fair few years of being single, I was pretty excited. To say most of my time was spent working and gaming. I never really had time to talk to girls, so her coming to me was convenient. We talked for hours online. A few days passed and we decided to meet. It was a pretty standard date, except we somehow ended up at my place and huked up moments before her last bus. I made her ejaculate with just normal as missionary alone, which apparently impressed her, because I remember the wow, what was that? Hitting my ego positively. She often explained she wasn't interested in relationships, and piece by piece I unlocked her backstory and what led her to be maniacally depressed. It wasn't nice. On top of years of bullying from students and teachers, an ex ruined her life, brought her into drugs, raped her and tried making her commit suicide. She was mentally drained. The time came for her, and she wanted to get into a real relationship. I thought, great, about time. I did not push her once, nor scoffed at the idea of friends with benefits, given my dry spell. Given the benefit of the doubt and me giving her room to make any relationship decisions, it felt good at the time. A couple months went by and her destructive nature began to stress itself through the cracks and intoxicate me, concreting tunnel vision around me little by little. She would often cause drama online with me for hours. It was the same pattern every time. we would be happy talking, and bang, she was firing accusations and absolutely insane things at me, telling me it's over and that I was to blame. No matter what I did to reassure and help, it was always wrong. I got it, she had issues. But I didn't need her to bite my hand every time I tried to help. In these moments she once told me to go die with such passion, and had absolutely no recollection of it. When I brought it up in another 4-hour debate, she would push and pull me, saying it's over, and 10 minutes later, her attitude has changed, and she is asking when she can see me next. This went on for months. My heart was in pain. Every time I saw her icon flash, a rush of fear and anxiety pillaged my heart and mind. I was so very scared of her. So insanely scared. I once came to see her at her uni dorm once. She dumped me in the evening after a night of heavy drinking and such. I was a blubbering mess. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. Months and months of my heart being wrenched came crashing down on me. I haven't cried like that since I was 5 years old, and I fractured my finger. She did this a lot, dump me and act like nothing happened. I started to think bipolar or something similar the first time it happened. In my tunnel vision, she wanted a piano on finance, and I was to use my card. We were happy away until she dumped me, and there were payments to be made. Luckily, her parents were honest people, and I can't fault them. They paid every month without fail. After the events she still tried to call out to me after finally getting away. Once our contract, so to speak, I blocked her because she would often explain the gory details of her new boyfriends, knowing full well it would upset me. She contacted me on her dog's Facebook page. You heard me, her dog's Facebook page. I told her straight, if you think for a second that I'm some backup boy, if shit goes wrong, you are mistaken. Amazing that in the moment they're everything. When I think of her now, I think of poison. She destroyed my job, my head, and left me as a shell of a person. I struggle to motivate myself on the daily, and I wish I weren't so blind to her antics and noped out sooner. I broke up with my ex, mainly because he would drink until he blacked out and never remembered being violent towards me. He would also not know what he was talking about and couldn't even string a sentence together most of the time. But what made me realize he was obviously living in a different reality was when he went over to his brother's place to play poker with friends, like he did every Saturday, and like every week before this specific one he lost any money he bet because he sucked at the game. Naturally he got blackout drunk and accused them of colluding against him and left in a fit of rage. I called his brother to ask if he knew where he was, but he hadn't seen him for hours. This wasn't unusual. He finally gets home about 2 AM. I'm just chilling playing PS4. I didn't even ask where he'd been for fear of him getting violent, and he started shouting that it was my fault that he lost the money. I asked him why, and he said it just is. So I calmly said to him, if you didn't bet it, you would still have it. And he started shouting at me, saying, oh yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you? More money for you, calling me a gold digger and a hoe, when at the time I was earning more than him because he only worked part-time. I stayed calm and suggested we go for a walk to calm down. He reluctantly agreed, and we walked for about 20 minutes until I hear him mumble something. I asked him what he said, and he shouts, for fuck's sake Jess, do you ever listen? Now, my name isn't and has never been Jess, but his ex-girlfriend's name is. Turns out that's where he was when he went missing for a couple of hours at his ex-girlfriend's house, in her bed. He sobered up a bit and started crying and finally told me that he had been cheating on me with her because he couldn't put up with how controlling and manipulative I am. I explained to him that I was the one who wasn't allowed to leave the house except for work. I hadn't seen my best friend in months because he's a guy and I might sleep with him. He accused me of cheating on him with multiple people, including his brother and his best friend, all the while he was out almost every night, probably having sex with whoever he liked. It took me way too long to realize it, but I finally saw the crazy, and I packed my stuff that night and left. He made me feel like I was the crazy one for so long. This will get buried, but about 1.5 years ago I went on a few dates with a girl I met at work. She seemed sweet at first, into video games, good family, very kind and giving. But a few things about her kind of just grated on me. She had a very thick Wisconsin accent despite not being from there, and she talked in run-on sentences. Periods were replaced with and now s. Anyways, I told her I didn't think a relationship was gonna work out, but being the horny bastard I am, I said we might be able to be friends with benefits. She agreed and tried to get me to promise that if I were to sleep with anyone else I would let her know. I ended up capitulating on that, mostly for health reasons. So a couple weeks later, I had an appointment for a massage later in the evening. Nothing seedy. It was the last appointment of the day at the spa. I got out around 9 PM and found she had texted me asking what I was up to. When I replied I had just finished a massage, she messaged, "A massage? I thought you promised to tell me if you were going to sleep with anyone else." To be fair, at that point I was kind of looking for a way to get her out of my life, and this was as good a red flag as any. So I blew up on her, basically telling her she had no business trying to dictate my personal life, and that if I had slept with anyone, I would have told her, but now her paranoia was going to cost her. She tried to play it all off, like it was a joke, and I almost believed her. Whether I cared was another story, until a few days later, when she texted my roommate asking if I was seeing anyone else. When he told her he wasn't going to snitch on me, she tried to say that was a joke as well. Cuckoo. After I popped one of my prescribed Klonopins in his company, he asked what it was, so I told him, and offered him one. I knew he had a lot of experience with all sorts of drugs, so thought he could handle himself. Fast forward a few hours and he's asking me where the third person in the room went. It had been just us two in an otherwise empty house the entire time. He then admitted he hated downers. A couple weeks later I took some Xanax that his roommate gave me, and he asked if he could have some. I asked, "Are you sure? You just told me you hate benzos." He said he'd be fine. He was only taking a quarter of what I was. BC I have a tolerance, and I figured hey, he's an adult with lots of experience with drugs, so I obviously can't stop him. An hour later he says he's gonna take more. I was pretty adamant this time. You know that's a bad idea, you really shouldn't, but you're an adult, so I can't stop you. Yeah, an hour later he ended up hooking up with both me and his roommate slash best friend of 5 years' girlfriend. Once it got beyond just making out, I put on my shirt and noped the fuck out to there. Next morning he realized he had probably misstepped. I asked him if he thought his roommate would be cool with what happened. They were in an open relationship, but I was unsure if hooking up best friends slash roommates was okay. He said he was pretty sure his friend would be cool with it. I said, "Okay, so you're gonna tell him, right?" He refused to. Months later he accused me of basically roofying him after I had dissuaded him from taking the drugs in the first place. I was a teenager at the time, and he was 23. We weren't in a relationship, because I only put up with it for one date. This guy was in a class of mine, and on the last day of the semester he told me I was cute, and gave me his number. We made plans for after the holidays to see a movie, but the movie he wanted to see wasn't going to start for 3 more hours, so we walked around the mall. He insisted on holding my hand, but would get very sweaty, so he'd pull away, wipe it on his shirt, and take my hand again. He made me pay for his food, something he didn't inform me of beforehand. He just walked away with his tray when I got to the cashier. Finally we return to the theater, where he asks me about my new class schedule, and tells me that Friday can be our date night, since I don't have classes. He goes to kiss me, pulls back, and says not bad. Overwhelmed and uncomfortable, I started crying, and he ignores me to start kissing me again. I excused myself to the restroom until the movie started. He grabbed my hand out of my lap and spent the whole film watching me so he could kiss me if I turned to look at him. I pretended not to notice and kept my eyes on the screen. When he was taking me home he continued talking about our future while ignoring the tears still running down my face. When he left he turned back to ask me for a photo to prove to his brother that I was real. I blocked him 2 days later after avoiding his increasingly agitated texts. I don't date so much anymore lol. I started talking to this guy who I knew back in freshman year, senior now. He asked me for a date and I gave in after a week. He looked okay, was muscular, and treats me nicely. On the day of the date, we decided to go somewhere farther than what was planned, so we had more get to know time. Here are some of the things he told me. He helps run their family business. He would work to be able to study back in high school. Though he's rich AF, he dated a lot of girls before. Had sex a couple of times already, once with a twin. He would say he had sex with 5 girls already, then hours later it would be 9 girls. I even felt guilty when I asked if he ever had a girlfriend. Then he said his first girlfriend died back in high school. I told this to my friend, who knows him back in high school, and she laughed at me so hard. She said the guy was an impulsive liar and that I shouldn't be dating him cause he has mental issues and should not be concerning myself with these. I asked him to meet up and told him that he should focus on his studies first. I felt really bad when I also found out that his parents used to hit him back in elementary. I should have seen the red flags but was dumb. Girl insisted that I call and text Jet basically all the time. She called on her way to and from work and would get mad when I didn't answer, even if I was working or busy with friends. Speaking of friends, she didn't like mine and felt she could take forever on the phone and interrupt a night because I was always with them. I saw them maybe once a week. If it was every day I'd understand why she could say that. After months of needing to talk every day and her being fairly horny and cool with sex, she started a fight with me by saying that I was too hands all the time. She told me she felt uncomfortable around me and thought I would rap her. I simply asked her if she felt that way, why didn't she say something sooner? She said I should have known she was uncomfortable. I was pissed, but still couldn't see the red flags. She then told me it was creepy that we texted all the time and that she had to call me every day. Said she was happy on the days she wasn't forced to communicate with me. I was very confused and said I thought she wanted to talk every day and that just pissed her off more. I said we should break up, but told her I was sad that we couldn't do our couples cosplay for a convention and asked if she'd still want to go as friends / break up after it. She said that I was guilt tripping her by asking that and blocked my number. Found out on Facebook that right after we broke up she was dating some dude due to leave for the military. Pretty sure she cheated on me. But at least now she's miserable because the love of her life just left for basic followed by 8 and has no idea when he'll be back. I think I can out on top, but I should've seen those flags, man. TLDR, she got belligerently drunk, cuffed by police, and then when her dad picked her up she went back to my house and came at me with a kitchen knife. Long story, so bear with me. I had been dating this girl for nearly a year and we went out to dinner with her dad and his girlfriend. During dinner, my girlfriend got pretty wasted, but managed to keep it together. I had a few beers myself, but was only slightly buzzed. After we parted ways with her dad / his partner, it became clear that my girlfriend was too drunk to drive, but still insisted on driving home. I told her she was too drunk, let's just get an Uber or something. She refused and kept insisting on taking her new car. I told her at the very least she should let me drive since I'm sober, and when I tried to get her keys from her, she became completely belligerent. She began hitting me, yelling rap, and he's assaulting me, to pass us be on the sidewalk all because I didn't want her to drive home drunk. She even grabbed my glasses off my face and destroyed them. Eventually, I calmed her down enough to convince her to let me drive us home in her car. We weren't in the car for 15 minutes when she started punching me in the head and yelling obscenities. I pulled over and kept her keys. She started chasing me down the sidewalk, forcing me to literally dodge behind taco trucks while she shouted crazy shit. She eventually told me that she was going to call the cops on me, and I told her to go right ahead. I realized I was totally out of my depth and definitely needed backup. She calls 911 and claims that her boyfriend is assaulting her, puts her hand to the mouth of the phone, and asks me what intersection we are at, and a few minutes later I see the lights and wave the cops over. I recounted everything to them, and while they tried to calm her down / get her side of the story, she quickly became angry / psycho with them too and completely insubordinate. They eventually pushed her against a wall, cuffed her, threw her in the back of the squad car, and asked whether there was someone I could call in lieu of taking her to jail to sober up. I called her dad. He came and picked her up and brought her back to his house, and she then convinced him to let her Uber home. While she was in the Uber on the way to her house, she rerouted and came to mine. I, idiotically, let her in. She started shouting and yelling shit at me, and at some point, grabbed my kitchen knife and held it up at me, which I had to wrestle from her. She was hitting me and shoving me, and the only way she was able to get to bed was after I pinned her down, and she tired herself out. If you're wondering, even after this shit we later moved in together and dated for over 9 months after that. I have posted this before. I was young, she was 5 years older than me. We had great chemistry, and there was a lot of love and passion. And when we were in bed, there would be fire. It was intense. We loved being with each other. But she wanted to get married ASAP. And I had no plans to get married for another 6 to 7 years. And we are from a culture where women not being married after 30 is considered taboo. And then some events happened that could potentially make it hard for us to live in a same country. I realized that it's better we parted ways, since I was in no position nor willing to get married. And then the craziness began. She was great, except when I tried to talk about breaking up, and then she would go into a psycho mode. It was like she would get possessed or something. I remember one day we were in a car. I was trying to tell her as nicely as I can that we don't have a future together, and she got super mad. She got on the freeway, started doing 90 miles per hour on a busy freeway while screaming at me. I thought I was going to die that day. Next day I called her parents and talked to them. They hated me and thought I broke their daughter's heart, and they got involved and helped her let go. 8 years have passed, and I have dated other girls since then, and now I'm married and have a kid. But I have never reached a level of love and passion with anyone else. And even today, not a single day passes without me thinking about her. I have realized that she was the only girl I ever truly loved and ever will. Grade 8. I met a guy. I was young, naive, never fell in love. As soon as I saw him, I knew I wanted a chance with him. It was so weird. 5 months later, start of grade 9, he asked me out. I was head over heels in love with him. My parents laughed and said I didn't know what love was until they met him. Slowly, more and more red flags popped up. Looking back, I wished I had seen them sooner. The first, my dog didn't like him. Not at all. She never acted anything but friendly around people, but around this boy she went nuts. Even nipped at him a few times. After 3 weeks, this boy told me he cheated on me. He lost his virginity way before he met me, but I hadn't even held hands with anyone before him. I tried not to let this bother me, but he was way more sexually mature than a 14-year-old should been. We dated for 10 months. He was overly controlling. Would hit guys that so much as tried to hug me, even if we were friends, before I met my boyfriend. At 8 months into the relationship, he asked for sex. I said no, I'm not ready yet. As soon as I said no, he pushed me away, went to the other side of the room. Wouldn't touch me, wouldn't look at me. He finally said, what if a part of me just doesn't want to belong to ex-girlfriend's name anymore? I cried. He just got up and left. Texted me later saying he was at her house. She texted me every 2 months from the start of my relationship saying that he was at her house having sex with her. If you don't put out, someone else will. The final straw was our 9-month mark. He invited me over, which was our usual hangout, because my dog was such a problem. His sister was gone, and he rapped me. I became distant. Every time I broke up with him, he'd run up to me at school and literally pick me up and run away. The administration scolded him, but did nothing more. I was scared. My social teacher approached me about it and asked if I needed help. Scared of this boyfriend, I lied and said I was fine. Eventually, he broke up with me because he wanted to fully commit to the ex-girlfriend he was screwing behind my back. Summer vacation came and passed. School started again. He followed me around, pushed me into lockers, cursed me out in the hall. Over the summer I found my woman power, and although I was terrified of this boy, I felt I did the right thing. I went to the administration, told my parents about everything except the rap, and they got the police involved. Almost got a restraining order. It's been a few years, still seeing my therapist for the trauma he put me through. Getting better, but trust is hard. Who knows what he's doing, nor do I care. TLDR, cheated on me from day one. My dog didn't like him. He was verbally abusive and controlling. Rapped me. In grade 9, he was 15 and I was 14. 1 year later almost got restraining order, but my parents didn't want to ruin his life.